We'll be looking at Jordan Addison's film today, how he projects as an NFL draft prospect. 3 years in college production, was the 2021 Biletnikoff winner, 100-catch season at Pitt playing with Kenny Pickett. Transferred to USC this past season, was their leading receiver as well. So we'll look at everything you need to know about him today.
A few of the biggest selling points for Addison as a receiver are that he is a creative player who thrives when he has to ad-lib. When the play breaks down, when scramble rules have to kick in, or he's just going and freelancing on his own. He is at his best. And combine this with his ability to contort and adjust to the football. He's got a very nice, effective catch radius, even though he's not a massive player. You look at this balance, ability to get that second foot down anyways, and stay on balance on this play. Really, really, really nice. And so you've got a player combine that with good speed and a good accelerator. You know, he's got a lot to work with, and you can see why he won the Biletnikoff in 2021.
Addison's best traits are probably his twitch and kind of balance-related traits, which kind of encompasses body control. And so the second of those traits, the balance-related ones, they're very prevalent throughout his game. You can see a variety of scenarios where it actually helps him here and there. After the catch, at the catch point, creating separation. You can find so many examples on his tape where it's the underlying kind of common trait throughout his game, and it kind of rounds out his game. Here's a play that kind of highlights his acceleration and ability after the catch. Is very fluid in terms of consistently over the course of time catching balls behind his frame and then transitioning upfield, taking advantages of creases, and then you can see his acceleration right here. So when you talk about, the concepts that they use him on, in terms of screens, bubble two was a staple of what USC ran, split backs looks, just ways to get the ball in his hands overall. Field side targets where he can be used as a spades player. So in terms of the NFL, he doesn't have to be the focal point of an offense. He can be a complement to where you're doing some of this stuff with how you can kind of utilize these traits. Just getting the ball in his hands, and he makes good decisions after the catch and has good ball handling traits as well. His peak season kind of lines up with other prospects like Elijah Moore, Jahan Dotson, and Deontay Johnson. In their peak seasons when they really had to kind of carry a little bit more of the load of the offense. So in terms of comparing him to Lincoln Riley offenses, Addison, 18.63% of his team's total yardage through the air, or could have easily been 24% if he simply just played more games. That still kind of puts him behind the peak seasons from Hollywood Brown and CeeDee Lamb in this offense back in 2018 and 2019. This offense doesn't typically funnel targets to a receiver, but Addison was kind of in the middle there. Either third or fourth if you kind of adjust it. This is what it is on its own. Two examples from 2022 that showcase how Addison can be used on kind of dig routes and variations of that. Partially it's due to his traits as well as his overall route running as he stems this outside, the believability of route running as well as the deceleration portion of it. And as you can kind of see here, Caleb is actually a little bit late here, understandably so. Right tackle gets beat. Has to move in the pocket, reset. This is a tough ask for any sort of corner. This is essentially single coverage based on how Utah kind of plays their coverages to the boundary. So the believability of route running, sell that head down, the transition, and then that deceleration, the trait that kind of adds to his overall route running, especially in the intermediate portions of the field. And the transition upfield to get more yards after the catch.
Later in the Utah game, you see another variant of this route, and what he does nicely here is he comes hard off the line, number 2 to the top of your screen, and then your body language. How do you effectively lie to the defender? First 5 yards, reading defender leverage, playing flat-footed, you have the zone indicator. So continues to run hard, stem outside in terms of his shoulder orientation, as well as his head fake, and keys that backside corner, or really the play side corner, for additional information. For this defender right here, from his vantage point, Addison sells it long enough to kind of be past even his peripheral field of visions. Can be difficult for him to kind of close late on that window. Then he peeks his head around in terms of IDing, taking in additional information about that safety too. So the 3 defenders that could have any sort of impact on this play, he's keying them at different portions of the route and kind of selling it. Breaks over in the middle of the field, and with Caleb Williams' arm, this ball's going to be open for pretty much whatever receiver. Nice little ability to stay on balance, get a few extra yards at the end. Receivers are reading coverage as much as, quarterbacks in a lot of these situations, a dig route against a zone or a match coverage that, that's pretty much going to be mostly relying on the quarterback, but it's also dependent on the receiver to react to the information that he's getting from the defense and kind of keep that window open as much as he can on the margin.
I always want to see how he does against bigger physical players who can hit. He's going to run a quick wheel out of the backfield right here, make a 19-yard reception, and take contact from the back here against a linebacker from Wake Forest, Ryan Smenda Jr., who's listed 6'2", 237. This is back in 2021 from the ACC Championship. He had 83 total tackles and 3 forced fumbles. He can hit a little bit, so, always want to see a sub-180 player. How do they handle contact, physicality in these types of situations where you have to brace and take contact from a much bigger player? So good job hanging on to the ball here, and I think he does a good overall job.
His drop rate's going to be anywhere between about 8.5%, and 10%, depending on the source you look at. It doesn't inherently have bad hands. It's maybe slightly above average for the quality of player he is, but we'll kind of just look into where these come and how you can kind of tailor his usage.
For how often he actually ran shallow crosses, his drop rate is disproportionately high. A few kind of variables, one kind of focus and concentration. There are some that he just drops in the nature of concentration-based drops. Another kind of variable with this is he's almost too aware or hyper vigilant, looking around for kind of coverage cues in a way we saw on that second rep against Utah, which benefited him there. But it can kind of hurt him on this particular route. For whatever reason, he's not that good at it. If you run a ton of mesh and you need him running shallow crosses and shallows over and over and over again, there's a lot of variables with this, but I think if you kind of eliminate this, you can see a lower drop rate from him in his career. Number 2, targets kind of outside the numbers or requiring full extension, or they're on the tail end of his catch radius. You can see a couple of these examples. They're naturally harder catches to make. There are a ton of plays that he consistently will make these plays. It's just that it's not every single time, and something that you would see from a guy who has A plus tier hands. So he's kind of below that threshold in this sense, but these are actually not as concerning based on how much you're going to see him kind of create separation. And the others is kind of high velocity targets or unexpected targets. I think there's kind of a difference in his ability to actually track a football down the field and make catch point adjustments when he can kind of see it the full way. There's some difference in his actual kind of hand-eye ability and related to actually catching a football. He does have very good hand-eye, but it's this one kind of little subcategory of it where his actual downfield tracking, and this is part of why you want him in kind of operating in a vertical route tree, intermediate ranges of the field. These kind of play into his usage overall, and shallow cross stuff, that's kind of the one area where you might want to stray away from, have someone else run that stuff. Obviously he's going to have to run some of it. We'll see kind of how he workshops that at the NFL level.
It'll be very interesting to see if Addison can play kind of above his weight, so to speak, if the balance kind of enables that in terms of his releases, dealing with physicality during routes, and kind of staying, almost having route integrity, not being thrown off of routes. These are 2 examples that, kind of showcase that potential. You just want to see it against better players. So if he does kind of meet his potential, this will probably come back as a key reason where, not only does he have the physical ability to change his orientation and cut drastically, and, he's got the twitch and everything, but this contact balance dimension that's not even really related to tackle breaking could be very key early and just throughout his career.
A lot of his press evidence, how good is he going to be? He's efficient off the line. He has a few different speed-oriented releases that he typically utilizes. We'll have to kind of keep adding a lot of that stuff in the NFL. A lot of his actual release work, after the line of scrimmage, you see how he manipulates route stems, really sells his route breaks, both on a technical and a physical level. He has the physical ability to sell route breaks and draw DPIs. So a lot of this is to be determined. We'll have to see kind of how he fares in the NFL level, but it's a question for the majority of receivers who are coming out in college. So put an asterisk by this one, come back to it in a couple of years. But overall, I think that he will progress to a certain degree. It just kind of remains to see, is he going to be able to access all areas of the field against high-end NFL corners who you just don't see a huge sample against. This play that you're going to see, selling an out and up and really, just using his speed. The defensive back here is John Humphrey, who's kind of a bigger, slower-footed corner. He actually, I believe, got benched later in this game after this play. So he's not even a, primary, he's not exactly a one-to-one comp for who you're going to be looking to compare him to at the NFL level. And
some of the negative plays that you'll see here and there, like there's a play against Oregon State that's kind of circulating where he's dealing with physicality and kind of gets manhandled a little bit.
The Steelers' Deontay Johnson's a pretty good case study to compare for Addison. Both players spent 3 years in college. Production peaked in their sophomore seasons. They went in similar ways as twitchy, outside the numbers route runners who can do more. You can kind of go down the list in terms of how you compare and contrast them, strengths and weaknesses.
Deontay Johnson was used more as a kick returner back at Toledo and early on in his career in the NFL. Probably has some more utilization there. He also had a higher drop rate, peaking with 13 his max season in the NFL. Addison shouldn't come in that high. Don't expect him to drop that many passes. So Johnson, when you look back at him at Toledo, was a more naturally inconsistent player. A little bit more muscle density. You can see the comparison.
So this is Deontay Johnson's spider chart. A little bit heavier than Addison, a little bit more compact at 5'10 and a half. Expect Addison to come in a little bit shy of 6 foot, 5'11 and change. Addison should run a little bit better than this. Probably have a little bit higher standing vert, kind of to be determined. But overall, you kind of have like a twitchier player. I've heard some people kind of compare it to Calvin Ridley, but Calvin Ridley was almost 6'1 and a buck 189 coming out in the draft, and I just don't kind of see Addison like at that level. So I think Johnson's more of kind of a direct comparison if you're looking at it.
If you view him as a high-end compliment, kind of treat him as such and draft him accordingly, which is probably outside the top 20 picks, but maybe it's not, depending on what system and how you want to use him exactly. So, the 25 to 45 range is probably where he goes. So I've got a mid-2 on him. We'll see kind of where he kind of progresses, how those dimensions of balance actually extend him in his game, and if he is able to overcome some of the weight players with low weight can kind of bump up against just on the margins. So very good player. I think whoever drafts him should be pretty happy.